What the hell is a land dweller? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Watches and Wonders. We made it another year, and we got this episode out to you as quickly as we really could. I'm not in Switzerland. I am here in suburban New Jersey, and I am just as excited as the rest of you about all these releases. We're going to be releasing about 10 episodes from this year's Watches and Wonders. The first will be about this Rolex Land Dweller, and we're going to go on into Cartier, into IWC, and the problem with the Ingenieur. We're going to talk about JLC, talk about Chopard, which I think had a really great year. A lot of amazing watch content coming, so subscribe to this channel if you want to hear really interesting thoughts and if you can bear my awful personality. Okay, what are we talking about today? The Land Dweller. Where should we start? It is the elephant in the room. That's why I chose it. Let's start off with the fact that Rolex is a little bit late to the integrated bracelet trend. This is a trend that was pre-COVID into COVID. This was Royal Oak. This was Nautilus. This was Ingenieur. I mean, IWC beat you guys to the frickin' game. How the hell is that possible? IWC released their Ingenieur in 2013. They beat Rolex to the trend. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that Rolex couldn't have been beaten by IWC, or does it mean that Rolex chose to pace everything out? Generally, I like to side with the intelligence of the crown because they really are very brilliant. It's also very similar to IWC and a lot of brands. I mean, Rolex has the historical legitimacy to release this watch. The Land Dweller is just a more modern evolution of the Rolex Oyster Quartz, right? I think that there's a problem in that, though, because the Oyster Quartz is very well known to watch aficionados like you and like I, but it does look more today, I think, to the average person like a Tudor Oyster Royal than it does a Rolex Oyster Quartz, which is funny because generally you want your Tudor to look like a Rolex, not your Rolex to look like a Tudor. Is this maybe the first time that, at least I, maybe you, comment down below, are noticing that the Rolex may look more, we may be assigning more of the credit to the Tudor copy than we are to the Rolex original design? I think that's kind of a weird kind of a feeling there. I think that probably was an unintended consequence. I'm sure something that was considered but unintended. Next portion of this conversation. What are the truly objectionable parts of this watch, variables in this watch? Well, I don't think it's the case design. I think it's quite lovely. I don't think it's the sizes in 40 and 36 millimeters. I don't think it's the case material, stainless steel, platinum, and rose gold. I don't think it's the beautiful baguettes that are offered on some of these models. I do think the name is very unprofound and unromantic. I don't think it's the fact that the name is fresh to my ears, that it hasn't settled yet. I don't think that Land Dweller sounds as great as Sky Dweller or Sea Dweller. I don't think it sounds as great as Cosmograph Daytona or Datejust. I don't think it sounds as good as the GMT Master 2 or the Submariner. I know I'm putting an affectation on these names, but I really do think these models have been named so damn well. And I really don't think that the Land Dweller has been named well at all. And I'm sure extensive market research was done on this matter. So I assume I'm wrong. I'm assuming that my general opinion does not ring true globally. It really is not true at large. That being said, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I like the name. Furthermore, what else do I think is somewhat objectionable about the watch? The dial. Do you guys like the dial? I'm really trying not to be a Rolex fanboy or a Rolex hater. I'm really trying to fall in the middle between just objectivity or fairness. I think the dial's off-putting. Reminds me of a soccer ball or a soccer net. Some people are saying some Lamborghini elements there. I don't know. All I know is it's not honeycomb. It's not a beautiful, older world, subtle pattern. And even the modern honeycombs, which aren't true honeycombs, found in the day-dates. I don't think they make them right now, but they've made them in modern history. Were nicer than this. I don't like these dials really at all. Okay, let's balance out an insult with a compliment. I think the proportions are fantastic. I think that these watches, they are objectively thinner. These watches are thinner. These watches are thinner. They have a different proportion, a different profile from the Datejust. But that's always how it was supposed to be. The Oyster Quartz was designed to be, well, of course, very much akin to the Datejust, sleeker, more industrial, but more balanced of a design. What do I mean? Well, the Datejust, as we know, came on at the time in the 1970s, a fairly thin Jubilee bracelet, or an Oyster bracelet, but generally a Jubilee bracelet. So what you had was a generally thin Jubilee bracelet with a more, still well-proportioned, but bulbous sort of case. Whereas with the oyster quartz, you had something that just really tapered all the way through. You don't have that same presence on the wrist, which is exactly what we're finding here again. I think that Rolex absolutely killed it on proportions. I don't even think the pricing is very bad. Around $13,000. I don't think that these watches are unfairly priced. So now let's go into a bit of a history of it. Let me take you a little bit down memory lane and talk about why I think that this watch does, while I can give it plenty of compliments in its design, why it falls a little bit flat for me. And I think that the basic thesis there is, Rolex sport models strive to be pillars in the spirit of adventure. If we go back to 1954, the Submariner, right? It wasn't the first commercial dive watch, but kind of defined the class. It was the watch that, yes, while really well made and reliable and luxurious in a sense, and would go on to be very luxurious in only 15 years from then, was the tool that you could trust with your life. Was a tool that you could go to the depths of the ocean and count on and beat up. There was something very solid about the Submariner. Now it's a little bit more jewelry-centric, but at the time there's something very solid about the Submariner. How about the Rolex Explorer, which was around the same time, maybe a year earlier in '53? This is a watch that was very aptly named. It was for the Explorer. It was for, the Explorer as an archetype, but a man, Sir Edmund Hillary, as he summited Mount Everest with his Sherpa, Tenzing Norgay. This was a wild feat of human accomplishment. This was the spirit of adventure. A little bit later into the 1960s, we see something that was experimental called the Space Dweller that was made for the Japanese market to celebrate NASA and its kind of global accomplishments. Again, pushing the spirit of adventure. Then we have just about a year later, in 1967, we have the Sea Dweller, the Submariner's bigger brother with a helium escape valve that could go even deeper, right? Then we've got the Sky Dweller. Now, this is going into 2012, and this is not introduced at a time of necessity or a time of, kind of pioneering, but in a time of more luxury, and it did make sense. It was Rolex's, annual calendar with a GMT function. I didn't even mention Rolex GMT, of course, another sports watch of the 1950s that championed the jet set, right? The Sky Dweller doing a very similar thing, but in a more, jewelry kind of forward way. This all has made sense. Of course, if we add in the Daytona as well, it all makes sense. Rolex's professional category has always been logical, somewhat literal even. Well, not even somewhat literal, very literal. I mean, the GMT, literally Greenwich Mean Time Master, right? All of this has been very literal. The Sea Dweller. What is a land dweller? And I don't mean to nitpick over this because the lines are going to be around the block regardless, but what is a land dweller? What does that even mean? Anyone with understanding of linguistics and no understanding of watch history could imagine what a Submariner watch does. Anyone could imagine what a Sky Dweller watch does. Anyone could imagine what any of these watches do, right? But a land dweller, I truly can't. Even an Explorer, really vague one, relatively speaking, one would easily deduce that, okay, it's made for explorers. What do explorers need? Watches that won't break if you take them everywhere. They can be really abused. Probably they can resist cold weather, right? I mean, it's not, it's not that far-fetched, right? All of this stuff makes sense. The land dweller, though, I just don't really see the function. Maybe that's my largest exception. I mean, it doesn't really seem to have a place in the catalog for me. I don't like the dial at all, and I truly don't like the name. They also introduced escapement technology that we'll get into in a later video, but I don't even want to go into that at the moment. I really just want to keep this more broad strokes and about the design and the placement of the catalog. And last but not least, I'm not sure if I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but even the release strategy I thought was a little bit odd. Rolex apparently in the last 2 years has proven that they are no longer able to actually keep privacy. They're no longer able to enforce embargo. Rolex is having leaks, and it doesn't seem like it's intentional. It really doesn't. I don't believe it is. Rolex has historically been very, very strict about this. To my understanding, they are still very strict about this. But I suppose the incentive to make the leak is greater than the possible repercussion. So Rolex is now getting ahead of it. Not only were there a couple of leaks that they were unable to stop, but they allowed Roger Federer, they encouraged or enabled Roger Federer to wear a land dweller recently, I think even on Instagram, right before the releases. So, really, we no longer have that watch release day. We no longer have that one day where everyone wakes up early and sees all the new watches. They're all coming out days in advance. slowly and unverified, and I feel like in many ways it's a little bit anticlimactic because there's so much skepticism that it's not just immediate shock of the truth. It is, I wonder if that's how, I don't know if I like it. That's really how the vibe has been this year, and I think last year as well. And again, leaking it through Roger Federer, kind of taking a page out of Omega's playbook too, which I think is the first time maybe ever, and if not in a very long time, which I don't think is a really great look for Rolex necessarily, right? Omega is supposed to be chasing them and their strategies, not the other way around. So if you want more content about watches and about all these watches that are being released this year, come on and like this video, subscribe to our channel. We've got a ton of amazing shit coming, and far fewer sponsors these days, moving in the direction that you have all cried for. So that's it. Watches, particularly vintage watches, represent this intersection of history, of design, of engineering. Theo and Harris is a family business. It always has been. And that's because we, my family, all share a passion for this remarkable intersection. For nearly a decade now, we have scoured the world from Oklahoma to Tokyo for some of the most interesting watches by some of the world's most revered manufacturers to share with our community. We handpick our collection, we look for quality, and we look for taste. We choose watches that, for one reason or another, speak to us. We authenticate them, we service them so they're ready for decades of memories to come, and then we share them here with you. We support our clients. We believe in expedited and fully insured shipping so they never have to wait. We believe in stress-free returns in the off chance they change their mind. We believe in building relationships that last. Theo and Harris is a family business. And we haven't just built a shop, we've built a community. So whether you're considering adding a vintage watch to your collection, a handmade strap to your life, or if you're just looking to talk watches, we're grateful that you've chosen us.